No one knows for certain where the name Iscariot comes from. No one knows for certain how he died. And no one knows for certain why a man who walked with Jesus for 3 years, who saw every miracle with his own eyes, who heard every teaching, sold him for the price of a slave. This is what history, archaeology, and the Bible actually say about Judas Iscariot. Most people know two things about Judas. He betrayed Jesus with a kiss, and he hanged himself afterward. That is the entire story for most of us. But the actual record is far stranger, far more contradictory, and far more important than the cartoon version we have been handed. Because Judas was not a footnote. He was chosen. He was trusted. He held the money. He sat at the Last Supper. And he walked with the Son of God for 3 years before he sold him. So let us look at who he actually was, what he actually did, and what the Bible actually says about how he died. Because the answers raise questions you may not be ready for. Before we go any further, listen to me for 1 second. If you are still here, that is not an accident. Something brought you here tonight, and the Word is going to find you. If this channel is speaking to something inside you, do one thing for us right now. Hit subscribe, like the video, drop a comment, even one word. Every subscribe, every like, every word you leave is a way of answering the Word. That is how this message reaches one more person tonight. And now, back to the story. Let us start with the name. The other 11 apostles were all from Galilee in the north. Peter, Andrew, James, John, all fishermen from the Sea of Galilee. Matthew, the tax collector, worked nearby. Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, all Galilean. Judas was the only one who was not. Most scholars believe Iscariot means man of Kerioth, a small town in the southern region of Judea, near the wilderness. He was the only southerner, the only one whose accent would have stood out, the only one who came from a different culture than the rest. That is not a small detail. In the first century, the gap between Galileans and Judeans was wide. Galilee was rural, mixed, looked down on. Judea was urban, religious, the seat of Jerusalem and the temple. A Judean among Galileans would have been the outsider from the very first day. And he was the one Jesus put in charge of the money. John chapter 12 verse 6 tells us, in passing, that Judas held the common purse for the group. And in the same sentence, John adds a detail he did not have to add. He says, "And as he had the bag, he took what was put into it." Translation: Judas was stealing from the group's funds the entire time. So here is the picture. The only outsider, the treasurer, the thief, walking every day with Jesus for 3 years, watching him raise Lazarus, watching him feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, watching him calm storms, watching him heal lepers, and selling him in the end for 30 pieces of silver. But here is where it gets stranger. Jesus knew. In John chapter 6, verse 64, the gospel writer tells us plainly, "For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that did not believe and who would betray him, from the beginning, not the night of the arrest, not the week before." From the day Judas was first called, Jesus already knew where it would end. A few verses later in John 6, verse 70, Jesus says to the 12, "Did I not choose you, the 12, and one of you is a devil?" Read that again. Jesus chose him. Knowing. That is the question that has troubled readers for 2,000 years. Why? Why would Jesus pick Judas, knowing what Judas would do? There is no clean answer. But there is a pattern. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus consistently chose people that no one else would have chosen. A fisherman who denied him 3 times, a tax collector that everyone hated, a zealot who wanted to overthrow Rome with violence, and a thief from the south. And there is also this, Psalm 41, verse 9, written 1,000 years before Jesus was born, says, "Even my own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, who did eat of my bread, has lifted up his heel against me." That verse is quoted directly in John 13, verse 18, when Jesus reveals at the Last Supper that one of the 12 will betray him. So the betrayal was not a surprise. It was prophecy fulfilling itself through the choices of a real man. Both things are true at once, and that is exactly the tension the Bible refuses to resolve for us. Now, let us talk about the money. Matthew chapter 26, verse 15, tells us that Judas went to the chief priests and asked, "What will you give me, and I will deliver him unto you?" And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver. Why that number? Exodus chapter 21, verse 32, sets the price. If an ox gores a slave to death, the owner of the ox must pay 30 shekels of silver to the slave's master. That was the legal price of a slave in ancient Israel. Not a freeman, a slave. So when Judas accepted 30 pieces of silver, he was not just selling Jesus. He was assigning Jesus the value of a slave. He was, in the most literal sense possible, putting a price on the Son of God, the price of a piece of property. And it had been prophesied 5 centuries earlier. The prophet Zechariah, in chapter 11, verses 12 and 13, writes this, "And I said unto them, If you think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said unto me, Cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver, and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. 30 pieces of silver, thrown to the potter, 500 years before it happened, written down." And in Matthew 27, after Judas threw the silver back into the temple, the chief priests used that exact money to buy the potter's field. Every detail lined up. So the question becomes, why did Judas do it? The Bible does not give a clean motive. John 12, verse 6 suggests greed, given his history of stealing. Luke 22, verse 3 says Satan entered into Judas. Some scholars over the centuries have proposed that Judas was trying to force Jesus' hand, hoping that if he was arrested, he would finally call down armies of angels and start the Messianic kingdom by force. We do not know. The text does not tell us. And maybe that is the point. Judas became, in the end, a mystery to himself. What we do know is what he did next. The arrest happened in the Garden of Gethsemane, late at night. Jesus had gone there to pray with the 11 after the Last Supper. Judas knew the place because Jesus had taken them there many times before. He came with a crowd from the chief priests, armed with swords and clubs. And he had arranged a signal in advance. Matthew 26, verse 48. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Hold him fast. A kiss. The most intimate sign one man could give another in that culture. The greeting of a son to his father, of a student to his rabbi, of a friend to his closest friend. And Judas walked up to Jesus, looked him in the eyes, and kissed him. Luke 22, verse 48, records the words Jesus said in response. Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? That sentence has been read for 2,000 years, and it still hits like nothing else in the Gospels. The grief of being betrayed by the most personal sign possible. Not a sword, not a shove, a kiss. Jesus did not curse him. He did not strike him down. He let it happen. The arrest proceeded. The soldiers took him, and Judas walked away into the dark, his pockets full of silver, on what would be the last full night of his life. If this video is making you see something you have never seen before, do us one favor right now. Hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Even one word. That is genuinely how this channel grows. We depend on you. Thank you for being here. And now we have to talk about the death. There are two accounts in the New Testament of how Judas died, and on the surface, they appear to contradict each other. Matthew chapter 27, verses 3 to 5 says this: Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself, and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? See thou to that. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple, and departed, and went and hanged himself. A hanging, remorse, a confession of innocent blood, a return of the money, a suicide. Now read Acts chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, written by Luke a few decades later. Now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it was known unto all the dwellers at Jerusalem, insomuch as that field is called in their tongue Akeldama, that is to say, the field of blood. A fall, a bursting, the body splitting open, the field bought with the betrayal money. Two accounts, different details. Most scholars across history have reconciled them this way. Judas hanged himself, as Matthew describes. The body remained on the rope for some time before it was discovered. The rope, or branch, eventually broke. The body fell, swollen and decomposed, onto rocky ground below, and it burst open on impact. It is an ugly image. It is meant to be. The early church did not soften it. The detail in Acts was not added for shock value. It was added because it had been witnessed, and because the field where it happened became a landmark. That field is still there, today, in the valley of Hinnom, just south of the old city of Jerusalem. It is called Akeldama, the field of blood, and it has held that name for 2,000 years. You can stand on the spot where, according to the earliest tradition, Judas Iscariot died. The money that was meant to buy him a future bought him a grave. After his death, the 11 gathered in Jerusalem. Acts chapter 1, verse 15 and following tells us that Peter stood up among the brothers and said, The position of Judas must be filled. Someone must take his bishopric. The requirements were specific. The replacement had to have been with them from the baptism of John all the way through the resurrection. Two men met those requirements: Joseph, called Barsabbas, who was also called Justus, and Matthias. They prayed. They cast lots. The lot fell on Matthias, and Judas was replaced in the official record of the 12. But here is what stays with me about all of this. Judas was not the only apostle who betrayed Jesus that week. Peter denied him 3 times, out loud, in a courtyard, while Jesus was being beaten a few rooms away. Peter cursed and swore he did not even know the man. 3 separate times, to 3 separate people. The gap between what Peter did and what Judas did is smaller than we like to admit. Both men collapsed under the pressure of the same night. Both men ran. Both men sold out Jesus in their own way. The kiss and the curse are not as far apart as we have been taught to believe. So what made the difference? Peter went back. Judas did not. Peter wept bitterly, as Matthew 26, verse 75, tells us. And when the risen Jesus appeared on the shore of Galilee a few weeks later, he asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" Once for each denial. And he restored him. Judas, as far as we know, never went back. He tried to undo the betrayal by returning the money. The Bible says he was filled with remorse. But he did not run to Jesus. He ran to a rope. 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10 says this, "For godly sorrow worketh repentance to salvation not to be repented of, but the sorrow of the world worketh death." 2 kinds of sorrow. One leads back to life, the other leads to death. Judas had the sorrow of the world. Peter had the sorrow of God. That is the entire difference between them. The lesson of Judas is not that some men are too far gone. It is that the door home is open even after the worst thing you can do. He simply did not walk through it. So what do we do with the story of Judas Iscariot? We do not have to call him a monster. The Bible does not. It calls him a thief, a traitor, a man under the influence of darkness. But it never tells us he was beyond reach. Jesus called him friend, even at the moment of the kiss. Matthew 26, verse 50. Friend, do that for which you are come. What we do have to take from this story is sober. None of us is too good to be Judas, and none of us is too far gone to be Peter. The line between those two ends of the same week is one decision, where you take your sorrow. 2,000 years later, his name is still spoken every time the Gospels are read aloud. The man from Kerioth, the treasurer, the thief, the kiss, the silver, the field of blood. And the question he leaves us with is the only one that matters in the end. When you fall, and you will fall, where will you take it? If this video changed the way you see Judas, the most important thing you can do right now is subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. That is genuinely how more people find this content. We depend on you to spread the word. Please keep us in your prayers. God bless you.